the Jets are still looking to upgrade the wide receiver position. So I'm going to give you guys my top 5 in order wide receiving prospects that I would like the New York Jets to go grab in the draft. So a lot went into making this list, and I definitely took into account our current draft picks and if we could get certain players where in the draft in a sort of a value perspective, but also them overall as a prospect. So let me start with my number 1 wide receiver, and it's Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. This guy was very fun to watch on film. He is probably the best route runner in this entire class. If you really look at the film, he's just great. He makes some amazing cuts that really, I think, could translate to the NFL level. Now, sometimes he does get a little bit too cute and takes a few extra steps when he doesn't need to, but man, he's really good at contested catches. I think that's something that I did not really think was a strength of his coming into this, but when I started evaluating Garrett Wilson, he's very good at the contested catches and also turning his body, adjusting to passes from CJ Stroud and Justin Fields. He was really great at that, and I think he would provide a lot of stability and continuity if the Jets drafted him. Now, it would probably be at pick number 10, honestly, or if we were to somehow trade back. I don't think he's falling anywhere past probably pick 16. So we would have to spend a premium pick on him. And it's for a reason, though. He's great at getting open and getting separation. He's ran pretty much all of the route tree, too, so that definitely checks off the boxes right there. Now, my only concern, really, is can he be a true number 1 wide receiver? And this is something that I think we'll have to take into account, because while he's great at pretty much everything, he's not really the biggest deep threat. And for wide receiver 1, you'd like them to be effective in all aspects of the game. And for Garrett Wilson, the deep ball and kind of the, it's not really his strength and strong suit. So you could look at it from that perspective and be like, why are we investing a premium first-round pick on a wide receiver who's probably going to be an elite wide receiver too? My counter to that is, man, we struggle to get open. Corey Davis, he did not really get open the most as the season progressed. Elijah Moore, he's good at creating separation too, but aside from that, we especially saw that during the later stretch of the games where we were losing bodies, guys were struggling to get open. Garrett Wilson would instantly come in and probably compete with Elijah Moore for the best route runner on the team, and it would definitely help this team out. He also has great hands too. Garrett Wilson barely had any drops, and the Jets had a lot of drops last year. So even though he is probably not going to be a true wide receiver 1, like maybe Jamar Chase, I would still draft him, and that's why he's my number 1, because we need someone who can run crisp routes. I think he could eventually get to that point of being near Amari Cooper type. Right now, obviously he's not, but with NFL coaching, he's only going to get even better, and his route running is just amazing at this point. So Garrett Wilson is my wide receiver 1 that I think the Jets should draft. My second wide receiver might come as a surprise to some, but it's George Pickens from Georgia. This guy was probably wide receiver 1 before the 2021 college season even started, but he had the ACL injury, and that's the main concern with him, is can he recover from that injury fully? And honestly, I'm not really too fazed by it, because he came back in the national championship game, and that's really his main concern, according to a lot of draft analysts. Now, the other concern I do have with him is sometimes he struggles to beat press coverage, so that's definitely something that he'll need to work on. But other than that, he's a phenomenal route runner. He has very strong hands too. He can run all types of routes. He could run the slants, he could run the in-breaking routes, he can run the out routes. He's great at hitches too. And he can also run the fades, so he can pretty much do it all. He's great with the posts, and he has the speed that is definitely wide receiver 1 capable. He can burn a defense if he wants to. Now, that wasn't necessarily his main role at Georgia in his time there, but he translates very well to the NFL. He's big-bodied. He has the weight too, but what I really like about him is how he likes to fight for the extra yards. If you turn on some of his highlights, he will fight for those extra yards, just pushing for it, and it's on like third downs too. So I think that's definitely something that coaches will take into account, is how badly are these guys fighting for their team when the game is coming down on the line. And George Pickens definitely does that. Now, I think his value is it's definitely increasing, and it's for a reason. He is great on film. Like I said, the only 2 knockbacks on him, really from at least what I saw, is the injury, even though he came back in the national championship game. Maybe the ACL will take away some of his explosiveness that we saw before in his film, and he struggles to beat press coverage. That's definitely something, and get separation on press coverage. But that could be coached up at the NFL level. But like I said, great route runner. He has the speed too, assuming the ACL is fully healed. He has great hands. He has a large wingspan. I mean, he is really that wide receiver one that I think could instantly be the best wide receiver in the draft if he goes to the right team. So I think it might be hard if we don't take him with the 10th overall pick. I don't think he's going to fall to any of our second round picks. I'm going to be honest. So we'd either have to trade back into the first round to go get him or take him at pick 10. But honestly, I would not mind taking him at pick 10. I really like George Pickens. Coming into this evaluation, I really thought he was like a second rounder, but man, he's a first round talent. This dude is a heck of an athlete. He's a heck of a football player. He would be a great fit on the Jets too. Now, I guess he doesn't necessarily fit the scheme of where once he has the ball in his hands, he can absolutely like turn and make people miss and run like a running back like Deebo Samuel. But he still does a lot of great things, and we don't really have that wide receiver one. George Pickens could easily be that wide receiver one, and then Corey Davis could be wide receiver two, and then Elijah Moore as a three. That would be a great trio. The third wide receiver is Drake London, a guy that we've heard linked to the Jets for a long time and that Joe Douglas is in love with him. Drake London is definitely someone that I could see being a perfect system and scheme fit, and someone that Mike LaFleur would love to have on this team just because of his ability with the ball in his hands. Once he gets the football in his hands, this dude reminds me of Deebo Samuel. I'm not going to lie. He is very hard for defenders to bring down. Now, whether that's due to his conference, which is one of my knocks on Drake London, and that's not even something he could control too. Because during the draft process, I don't like making cons for players with something that they can't control. He can't control the conference he plays in and the competition level. He can control his own level of play, and he excelled at it. I think he only played 8 games this season, had over 1,000 yards too, which is crazy. But if you turn on the highlights, once he gets the ball in his hands, he'll make like 2 people miss. He'll fight for the end zone too. This guy is he wants to get the first down. He wants to fight for his teammates. I love that aspect of his game. And he's good with the short routes. He's very good on slant routes. Now, a concern I do have is his route tree, because he doesn't really have any of those complicated NFL type of routes, but he does excel with those fades. He really does. He's great at adjusting to the football, because Keaton Slovis would sometimes underthrow him the football, and he'd make a great adjustment in the air. That's something that is a quarterback would just love to have, because even if the throw isn't perfect by the quarterback, the wide receiver can kind of bail him out. So I think Zach Wilson would definitely appreciate that, and so would the coaching staff, because we talked about helping Zach Wilson in all these ways by getting him a great wide receiver, a great offensive line, all these weapons. But a wide receiver that knows and has shown in the past that he can help out a quarterback even when he's not on his best day. That's Drake London for sure. He's a big-bodied. He's over 6 foot. He would definitely add some height to this wide receiver room that we as Jets fans criticize for being too small, too short, not playing physical enough. Drake London would play physical enough. He's not afraid to get hit. He will lock onto the ball. He's not worried about if the safety's going to crash on him and potentially crack him. No. His main focus is catching the football. He's very great hands from what I saw, but the main attractive feature is what he could do after the catch, yards after the catch. He reminds me of Kadarius Toney in that aspect, except he's bigger. So his comparison is probably Deebo Samuel. Now, I would like to see him maybe refine his route running, and when he comes into the NFL, he will have to learn more complex NFL routes and schemes. So that might be a little bit of a learning curve for a little bit, but if he can do that, this guy will be an absolute playmaker, and you'll be seeing him on highlight films for years to come. Now, we would probably have to draft him with pick 10. Like I said, unless we trade back, there is probably a low chance he falls to the second round. Although it's possible, I doubt it with the wide receiver needy teams towards the back end of the draft. So, Drake London, it really depends on where you think his value is, but this guy's a playmaker. Literally. What is a playmaker? When they have the ball in their hands, they will make something out of nothing. Drake London does that. He is phenomenal with the ball in his hands. And coming into this, I thought he was a little bit overrated. And while maybe he isn't the best route runner and guy who's going to get open all the time, the ball's in his hands. Defenses are going to be scared. So I would love Drake London on the New York Jets. The fourth guy is a Twitter favorite and just a straight-up athlete. It's Christian Watson from North Dakota State. While he's one of the more quote-unquote raw wide receiver prospects in this class, his physical ability and talent just draws you into wanting to have him on your team. Just because if he develops, he could very well be that X wide receiver one that defensive coordinators are game planning for and doubling him. I think when I turned on the film and some of his highlights, something that really stood out to me is that he has extreme burst. I'm telling you, this guy he pushes his foot on the accelerator because he can blaze it. I remember there was a screen pass, and he just ran for like 40 yards for a touchdown, blazed past all the defenders. That's something very enticing. His speed really reminded me of Jamar Chase. Now, I'm not saying right now, I'm not saying day one when he comes into the NFL that Christian Watson's going to be Jamar Chase. No. If anything, it's going to take probably till year 2, year 3, but he is still very explosive, and the Jets lack that true explosive wide receiver, in my opinion. Elijah Moore could be that guy, but I think he serves better as maybe a wide receiver 2 if we keep the current wideouts, or a wide receiver 3 who primarily focuses towards the middle of the field. So Christian Watson could essentially be that deep threat that we've sort of lacked. I wouldn't call Corey Davis a deep threat necessarily. He's more of an intermediate type of guy. But Christian Watson could really take the top off of a defense. And similar to Drake London, if he has the ball in his hands, you don't know, because he could turn probably a 3-yard play or a 3-yard completion into a 20-plus yard completion. This guy, he really has the blazers and the burners. I think he's being overlooked maybe by Jameson Williams' speed, but don't sleep on Christian Watson. Now, he is more raw, so his impact day one might not be as good as the other wide receivers mentioned before him, but I think Christian Watson could still provide that explosive element that this Jets offense lacked a lot last year. And where we could draft Christian Watson, we might be able to get him in the second round. If anything, Christian Watson is the wide receiver I'm most confident being available in the second round. Now, there is a lot of talk about him going to the Kansas City Chiefs or the Green Bay Packers since they just lost Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But there is a very realistic chance that he could slip to the second round. Now, a concern I do have with him is his route running. It's not the most polished out of all the wide receivers, but he's a physical specimen. He has the tools to be able to be that X receiver in the NFL, that wide receiver 1. But like I said, another con on him is maybe that his day one impact will not be as good as any of these wide receivers, and if we want to help Zach Wilson, we'd like to see some immediate assistance for him rather than being patient, because as Jets fans, we try and be patient all the time, and then we be impatient. So that's Christian Watson, though. I think there's a high chance we could get him at pick 35, which is why I have him as the 4th overall wide receiver in this draft for me, including value. The 5th wide receiver, the last wide receiver I have, you've been hearing his name all along, is the real wide receiver 1 in this draft, and it's Jameson Williams from Alabama. He put on a stellar season with the Crimson Tide this past year, over 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, and here's a fun fact, 13 of those 15 touchdowns were over 20-plus yards. I mean, come on, talk about explosiveness. That is Jameson Williams' main factor. He can really burn by a cornerback. It's crazy. He probably possesses that feature the best out of any other wide receiver in this draft. He's good with his routes. I wouldn't say he's a Garrett Wilson type, but he can still get open. He can do it in the intermediate parts of the field, in the short areas of the field, and especially the deep threat. He definitely provides that deep threat that I think the Jets do not have, similar to what I was talking about with potentially Christian Watson in that aspect. So if we're talking about Jameson Williams, I think we have to definitely take the injury into account. He tore his ACL in the national championship game. That was not too long ago. That was only in January, so he might not be ready day one. So it would be a little bit of a gamble. However, we've seen it where wide receivers, they get hurt in college, they fall in the draft, and then what do you know? 2 years later, they're one of the best from that draft class. So history shows that it is not the worst idea taking a gamble on a player that just got injured before. Now, we would probably have to take him with the 10th overall pick. He is being considered wide receiver 1 by a lot of analysts, and his stock has surprisingly started rising back up again because people are talking about, is Jameson Williams going to slip to the second round? I think we should snag him in the second. He's not going to be, no team's going to take him in the first round. I see that narrative starting to slowly disappear now on Twitter, so it really got me thinking about Jameson Williams. Now, I have him 5th because of his value, because we would have to take him with the 10th overall pick, and it would be a little bit risky because of that injury. Even though history shows that it is possible that he could turn into a superstar and a great draft selection, there is still some concern because an ACL is a major injury, but with the sports medicine that we have today, maybe that's not as big of a concern as it was a few years ago, honestly. But Jameson Williams, the only other con I have is maybe he doesn't play as physical enough as I would like to see. He didn't have many drops, though, which is a great thing to have because the Jets had a lot of drops last season, and Jameson Williams will not drop the ball, and hopefully he won't, as much as we had drops last season. And I guess the only other concern that I do have about Jameson Williams is that he didn't really get playing time at Ohio State. I understand that they have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson at Ohio State, and the other wide receivers I'm just blanking on right now. But why was he buried on the depth chart so much, and why did he suddenly explode at Alabama? Now, it could be a contributor to work ethic, and if that's the case, then that's amazing. And I think that Robert Saleh and Michael Ford would love that, because they love players who love the game of football. So maybe he got motivated by being on the bench for most of his time at Ohio State. So Jameson Williams rounds off the list at number 5, and these are just sort of the wide receivers that I think the Jets could draft from our 10th overall pick to our second round pick at pick 38. I'm going to do another video with some later round receivers, but these are the top 5 wide receivers I have ranked based on value in the draft and also them overall as a wide receiver prospect. So thank you guys for watching towards the end of this video. I'm going to be coming out with all these positional groups besides quarterback probably. So let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear all and everything. Disagree, agree with me in the comments. I'd love to hear any discourse. And let's start a conversation because the draft is coming soon. I'd love to gain more insight. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.